Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Asilanti. I'm from Lowerman University, major English Literature, 2018. So, in this video, I will tell you about a brief explanation that I've learned in a half of semester of history of literature. Topics that we are going to talk about are Old English, medieval period, Reformation era and Renaissance era, and Revolution and Restoration era. First era is from Old English or Anglo-Saxon. The term Old English was invented as a patriotic and philological convenience. The more familiar term Anglo-Saxon has a far older pedigree. Old English implied that there was a cultural continuity between the England of the 6th century and the England of 19th century. For this era, the characteristic of works is all anonymous, mostly oral poetry. Little has survived. Poetry doesn't rhyme. Alliteration is their central principle. Beowulf is a heroic epic in alliterative verse. Next is the author and their works. A legendary hero who kills powerful, frightening creatures and becomes a king was celebrated in the Old English epic, Beowulf, written by an unknown writer in the 8th century. It was long held that the most substantial surviving Old English poem, Beowulf, was a pre-Christian composition which had somehow been tempered with by monastic scribes in order to give it an acceptably Christian frame of reference. Beowulf refers back to an age of monster slayings in Scandinavia, but it interprets them as struggle between good and evil, between humanity and the destructive forces which undo human order. The most important king of this Anglo-Saxon period, Alfred the Great, was also a scholar and writer. He supported the Anglo-Saxon chronicle describing the life, history, and language of this time. The second one is medieval era. It's a broad subject encompassing essentially all written works available in Europe and beyond during the Middle Ages. The literature of this time was composed of religious writings as well as secular works. Just as in modern literature, it is a complex and rich field of study, from the utterly sacred of the exuberantly profane, touching all points in between. Works of literature are often grouped by place of origin, language, and genre. In this era, the Normans begin to rule England. French became the language of the court and of administration, and literature aimed at a popular audience grew, and a range of genres emerged. The characteristic of works in this era, in drama, miracle plays and mystery plays, performed in Market Square. Many of works of medieval literature are by unknown authors. The themes of the text have moral, ethical, and didactic contents of Christianity that were supervised by church. It developed story of chivalry to promote Christian values. For the author and their works is from Geoffrey Chaucer, is considered to be the father of English poetry because he wrote in English rather than in French or Latin. His Canterbury Tales records the imagined conversations of pilgrims as they journeyed from London to Canterbury. The next one is Reformation era. The Reformation was the start of Protestantism and the split of Protestantism from the Roman Catholic Church. because in 1533 King Henry VIII declared his independence from papal overlordship had been asserted in the preamble to the Act of Parliament, which announced the advent of the English Reformation, given the assertion that the islands of Britain and the Ireland represented a law unto themselves, and given the claims of the Tudor monarch to an imperial sovereignty, the process of extending the political influence of the kings of England was pursued with a particular reforming figure by the ministers and servants of the crown. The next one is Renaissance era. The literature of the Renaissance was written within the general movement of Renaissance, which arose in 14th century Italy and continued until 16th century while being diffused into the rest of the Western world. This era, also called the early modern period, and also this era refers to flourishing of the arts. One key characteristic of the Renaissance was the idea of divine right of kings to rule. Another was the development to humanistic ideas such as a dignity of man. It was a time of scientific inquiry and exploration. This was also the time of the Protestant Reformation and invention of the printing press. The relationship between Reformation and Renaissance era, the ideas during the Renaissance, humanist ideas, and ancient of Roman and Greek works began to spread to kingdoms in Europe, including England. These ideas shaped and influenced literary works in England during the Reform era and became the peak of glory. The author and their works in this era are John Skelton, William Shakespeare, and Sir Philip Sidney. To the most prominent and most senior of the early Tudor poets, the language used by Chaucer, Gower, and Lydgate now had self-evident disadvantages. In the character of Dame Margery, the narrator of his poem, Philip Sparrowy, he complains of the impossibility of writing eloquently in his native tongue. William Shakespeare, the world's greatest playwright, wrote historical plays about kings of England, comedy genres, tragedies, as well as love poetry in the form of sonnet. Many well-known English sayings come from Shakespeare's work, and he had a great influence on the English language. A handful of 16th century texts, most notably Sir Philip Sidney's Arcadia, continued to be popular, however, with a wide range of English readers long after the age and the audience for which they were originally written. Sidney's Arcadia, first printed in its unfinished, revised form in 1590 and in 1593 published in a new version cobbled together with additions from an early manuscript, remain a standard favorite. Last one is Revolution and Restoration era. Begin in 1660, the year in which King Charles II was restored to the English throne. This period usually is seen as dominated by a neoclassical aesthetic and ethos that emphasize decorum, general or universal truths, and the proper use of language and form as established by older models as opposed to innovation and or the expression of individual or ideas. Also, in this period known as the Augustan Age period, because many of the artists and writers are greatly influenced by the classics, and this period marked by more social and democratic, as many people wanted to participate in the debates that took place. A lot of civil war and also theatres were reopened after closing during Cromwell's Puritan regime. For the characteristic of works in this era, theater came back into popularity and drama typically focused on the aristocracy. In this era, also known metaphysical poetry that has characteristics such as witty, complex, paradoxical poetry, formally innovative and inventive, and also innovative religious poetry. The authors and their works is from the first person is John Milton. One of the greatest poets is celebrated for his powerful rhetoric poetry and is famous mainly for his epic poem Paradise. The second person is from Isaac Newton. The Principia is considered one of the most important works in the history of science. The method followed by its illustrious author Sir Newton spread the light of mathematics on a science which up to then had remained in the darkness of conjectures and hypotheses. The third one is from Jonathan Swift with his works named Gulliver Travels. It is best known full-length works and a classic of English literature, and the Amadeus Proposal. It is a Juvenalian satirical essays written and published anonymously by Jonathan Swift in 1729. So, the conclusion from this topic is every time or every era has a different story and conditions. When a voice is silenced or not heard, one way to express it is to make a work that makes them aware about the writer's emotion or the condition of the environment. So that's my explanation. I hope you like it and enjoy it. I hope you can get something from my explanation. Thank you very much for watching this video and see you next time. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye.